Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you were here yesterday, you would have had the privilege of hearing from my husband. He laid an incredible foundation in part one, talking about the dynamics of anxiety within systems. But today, for part two, we are shifting from the big picture to ground level. We're talking about your everyday reality. To give you a little context on why I care so deeply about this, in my daily work, I lead the management residency and business internship program at Loma Linda University Health. My entire world revolves around developing emerging leaders and helping early career professionals navigate the intense, often confusing pipelines of large organizations. Before stepping into healthcare, I spent 7 years in higher education, advancing institutional change, guiding policy reform, and navigating culture evolution across 2 federal administrations. My background sits right at the intersection of equity, compliance, and change leadership. Practically speaking, that means I've spent nearly a decade watching up close how massive institutional systems operate and how easily they can swallow people up if they aren't careful. My mission today is to help you move from these powerful systems, climb the ladders, and excel in your work without losing absolute clarity about who God made you to be. I haven't said it already, but my name is Cassandre Beccai. Welcome, and let's dive into how we hold our identity in the workplace. So in part one, we establish what it means to show up as a non-anxious presence. Today, we're asking a follow-up question. How do we maintain a faithful presence? Part one was about how anxiety moves through a system. Part two is about how the workplace actively shapes your identity. And look, here's the reality. A grounded person still has to learn how to stay grounded when they're actually sent into a real, messy, high-pressure system. You can be perfectly at peace in isolation, but what happens when you enter the grid? The workplace is forming you. So you'll probably notice I chose a very visceral, type of photo, one where you can almost feel like you are touching the clay and feeling it spin around your hands. You know, I thought this was a very good photo to show how work itself can form the person that you're becoming. There are so many different pressures, so many places you can go when it comes to work. And I've learned quite early on that if you're not careful, work can form you in the ways that you may not have been cognizant of, conscious of, or wanting. Some of the ways that the workplace can form you is in the hours that are kept, different compromises within the context of the work itself or between you and colleagues. You might find yourself becoming a version of yourself you did not subscribe to. You might find certain anxieties developing over time and also habits habits that at one point you did not even think could be yours to have. My very first job out of college was at a fast-paced tech startup, and it was incredibly difficult. The unwritten rules of the workplace were completely different than what I had experienced at school. And I was constantly handed tasks that felt nearly impossible. I just remember my boss, and it felt so cruel. I was like, why are you asking me to do this? I feel like I can't. And I remember that low-grade anxiety that began to shape my weekends, my sleep, my habits. I was absorbing the panic of that system, and it was quietly reshaping how I viewed my own worth. I didn't have the tools then to realize the workplace was forming me, and that's why we're here today. I wanted to talk about that. But before I get into all of this talking, I really want to hear a little bit about where you are at right now. So if you are able, and I'm not sure why this is all covered here, but anyway, you can pull out your phone and use that QR code to the right. Y'all, hopefully it will actually show up. I'm sorry, I don't know why this is like covering it here. But if you pull it up, and you will be able to see the survey on your phone and respond accordingly. I think you can select up to 3 different responses. What pressures feel most real right now? Which one of these feels like the heaviest pressure for you when you think about work, when you think about career, when you think about everything surrounding becoming that professional? It doesn't work? That's okay. Thank you so much. It's covered up, right? I have no idea why. Yeah. So, if you go to menti.com, thank you very much. So instead of using the QR code, you're welcome to go to menti.com, menti.com, and use that number here, and it will link you to the survey online. And at the same time, I am happy for you all to call out the responses that resonate best. So which one of these responses resonates the most for you as a pressure at this time? Don't worry about the slide. It'll figure itself out. You don't need to stress yourself. I'd love to see it on here, but don't worry if it's not working. Anybody have any thoughts about which of these responses feel most real right now? Where you belong, proving you belong. I liked when you said providing. Is that something that feels more real for you now? Okay, gotcha. Okay. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Said knowing your purpose. Thank you. Yes. Not falling behind with work. Yeah, I feel you on that one. I know how it feels. Go ahead. Temptations, different temptations within the context of the workplace, what your colleagues, ethics, things like that. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Now, I can't tell which of these resonate with the room the most, but I heard something from almost all of these, and I really appreciate your willingness to share. These are dynamics that are very, very real when we think about a space that requires us to perform, to earn money to live. It makes sense that we feel the pressure in all types of ways. And especially for young people who are just coming in, who have been in the workplace for even just a little while, these are types of pressures that can feel like they just hang on you. No matter how long you've been in the role or in that career. So one thing I think that's going to be super important as we consider what it looks like to be a non-anxious presence, a faithful presence in the workplace. What's going to be important when we're thinking about holding our identity is to really be grounded in what the Word says about us. The fight is against an unconscious formation. And it's really important that we bring ourselves back to a baseline, a grounded truth about who you are, that your identity does not begin with a job title and whatever you earn, whatever is on your resume, whatever corporate title, however you need to answer to your supervisor. All of those things come secondary to the truth that you are a human being that was formed in God's image. The workplace tries to tell you that you are what you produce, that you are what you earn, that you are who you manage. And Scripture says something completely different, that your inherited status cannot be given or taken away by any corporation. Genesis 1, verse 26 to 28 is where we will start with that. Is there a volunteer in the room that would be willing to read this text out loud for us? Stop for a minute. Thank you. What I want you to do after reading the rest of this text, I'm going to have you read the rest of this text, is for the rest of the room to spot the first command that God gives to humanity in this text. So when our volunteer finishes reading, I'm going to ask you to shout out what that first command is. Can you please continue from verse 27? Okay. All right, so we read the text together. This is a very familiar text. I'm speaking to a room full of people who, whether you've memorized it or not, or know this, read it for yourself or heard it as a child, you have heard this text. But what I'm wanting us to consider right now is, what is the first command given to mankind? It's very plain, it's very clear here. Tell me. Be fruitful and multiply. All right, so did we hear work 80 hours a week? Was the command toil until you have a bad headache and can't even sleep because of the anxiety? No, right? It's be fruitful, it's to multiply, it's to fill the earth, it's to flourish, it's to grow, it's to bring life, it's to be abundant. This is what our identity comes from. It's not about grinding. The very first thing that we are asked to do is to flourish. And friends, if we're not familiar with this, if we haven't grounded ourselves in the truth of this, it's so easy to get caught up in how the corporate world or how the world of work requires, what it requires from us on the day to day. You were not created merely to consume the world. You were created to cultivate it. This is another one of the things that we must understand as a grounding principle when we consider what it means to hold our identity in the workplace and what it looks like to be a non-anxious presence and a faithful presence. The text is found in Genesis 2:15, when Adam and Eve are placed in creation. I'm going to bring up the text here. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and read that text for me. Did I have a volunteer? I feel like some people want to read. Thank you. So let me ask you, instead of doing a poll on the slide here through Menti, I was hoping that we might do a physical poll this afternoon. And I'll keep it simple. Why don't you just raise your hand if you ever had a day at work where you felt like you were just pulling weeds, dealing with thistle and situations and hitting constant roadblocks. Anybody had that type of day before? All right. It's like almost the entire room, right? Keep your hand up if you've ever felt that Sunday evening knot of anxiety in your stomach before the Monday morning work day start. Yeah, you guys know. Actually, I think for me, this started even before work. There's a school sometimes, right? It's intense. It's intense. You know, we all feel this tension, and why? That's because we no longer live in that Genesis 2, that experience of just living and doing that good work. We live in what I would say Genesis 3. And we can speak a little to this, and I'm sure that folks have some personal experiences here. And the problem is when work forms us unconsciously. See, Genesis 2 was talking about how God had put Adam and Eve to work in the Garden of Eden, and they were there to take care of it. But as we read on in the story, something happens. Sin shatters the entire design, and work itself, instead of being a good place to be, a place where one can feel fulfilled and to be creative and to cultivate and feel good about it, work becomes toil. It gets tangled up with anxiety, scarcity, survival, and frustration. We're going to go to Genesis 3 right now, verses 17 to 19. And what I'll want is for, before our next volunteer reads this passage, I want you all to have take a mental challenge where you look for the word in this text that represents your absolute worst day at the office. I want you to listen for it and really think on which of these words here really feel like the worst days. So may I have a volunteer to read verses 17 to 19 of Genesis 3? Okay. All right. So, which of you can say that the word thorns describes that feeling, that's the worst day at work? Yeah. And then we've got here sweat, dust. Any of this resonate with you on what that day, that worst day of work feels like to you? So, one of the things that I think can be really good when we think about being a non anxious and faithful presence at work is not just the grounding in the truth of what work was created for us, that work was created as a good thing for us, and that we were created as image bearers of God, but also to be reminded that we certainly aren't the first and last people on the earth to ever experience the difficulty of work. You know, I think it was really more recently for me that I recognized that most people who work on a day-to-day basis, even when they love their job, have aspects of the work that's particularly difficult. That work itself can just have these moments where you feel it deeply as something that is not gratifying, something that doesn't feel good. And when you realize that work, after sin entered the world, has this component, you're not so locked into receiving those feelings as though it's your fault or you've done something wrong or that you must not be cut out to do good work. That's something that's important to consider, even in the midst of this, that you were created in God's image. You were given work. We were given work as human beings, full of dignity, to do creative things, to cultivate this world. And also, when sin came into this world, work just became difficult. And that is something we want to understand and realize that it does not make us, it doesn't keep us, it mustn't be something that we take on as a defining thing that only happens to you, but rather the experience of most people. You know, I want to pause right here to give some reflection as we consider our identity before work, before work that was sin-tainted came into this world. And before we were given this 8 to 5 schedule, before we needed to consider getting a salary so that we can make things happen in other parts of our lives, for example, like putting food on the table, we want to identify who we are even before work names us. And my question for you today is to consider in the next couple of minutes this quiet reflection, whether you want to write it in your phone or just, in your mind to think quietly. I want you to fill out these 4 statements and then turn to your partner, to your neighbor, anyone sitting next to you, and talk a little bit about who you are before work names you. Who do you know yourself to be? And we've got, I am blank. I have been given such and such talent. I am called to cultivate X, Y, and Z field. I must not confuse my worth with my salary, my whatever. So let me give you guys a few minutes to think on that by yourself and then turn to your neighbor and share a little bit about what stands out for you here and specifically what your identity before work is. So go ahead. I don't have my phone here to time about 5 minutes. But we're going to give this activity about 5 minutes, and then we'll collect our thoughts together, okay? Thank you so much for taking the time. So, in your conversations with each other, what came up? What surfaced? What felt particularly interesting? Hi.
Okay, but she has a husband and children, and they're there to support her. That's wonderful, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I came to this class, except I think God meant me to be here, because I'm retired. I've been retired for 11 years. I'm not young, but I'm considering going back to work.
I see.
And in a completely different field. I worked almost 42 years as a secretary for the federal government, and I did not like it. I mean, it just paid the bills. But I'm thinking of going into either daycare or senior care. And so I answered that question. I must not confuse my worth with work.
Yes, that's so rich. And thank you for highlighting Ruth and the work that she does. You know, Ruth, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I am curious to know, how you were able to answer the I am part. Because yeah, you're a mother and you're a wife. And also underneath the work that you do, I imagine that there's a part of you that has always felt that you were aligning with God, you were partnering with him in doing something incredible on this earth. And I'm curious, what would you describe that if there was no, not with your title, but what is that? What is that I am?
I started with I am Ruth.
Yes, that's
And
right.
and then I said I am Christian. So,
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, that's the reason why I chose the work that I'm
That's
in.
right.
God blessed me and gave me a full ride scholarship to law school, so I didn't have to worry about being in a high-paying position to pay off those loans. So I was able to go into the public sector and work with people who suffer from mental health issues, drug issues, and just make sure their rights are protected whether they like you or not. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I didn't get your partner's name, Ruth.
Eileen.
Eileen, thank you, Eileen. I so appreciate that you're here because I think vocation, I mean, we're talking about workplace, so there's that. It was very specific, but I think there's something to be said about even when you're not working, you're not in a stage in life to work. I think there's a calling on each of us to do good work. And I think it's really important that we don't confuse, like you said, Eileen.
Eileen.
I thank you, Eileen.
Eileen, you lean, we all lean.
Thank
That's how
you.
you can remember my name.
Thank you, Eileen. Eileen,
lean.
you're not trying to confuse your worth with a job title, a job, because God's given you something to do even outside of that context, right?
Right.
And it's even better when that context is a vessel for the work that God's always wanted you to do, right? And any other thoughts that came up in this conversation, whether it is you want to talk about what you've been given, perhaps in talent-wise, or what you're here to cultivate? Yes, please. Oh, okay.
So I think I've been given gifts to help others, and I believe that God has called me to cultivate those gifts in sharing the words with others and to draw others to persons to Christ. And that's one of the reasons why I've decided to go full-time into ministry, like hospital ministry and prison ministry. I think that's one of the gifts that God has given me. And I must not confuse my worth with my success or productivity. I think society tries to put us in that light where, our worth is defined by our education or, achievements, instead of like, doing God's will, what He calls us to do, to be fishers of men. So I think a lot of times that has been put on the back burner for us.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on choosing what you feel God's calling you to do. Thank you so much. What is your name? Pita. Thank you. So nice to meet you. Yes.
My name is Joey, and I am a fantastic person, and I have been given the gift of living, and also given the gift of going back to school.
Oh, congratulations.
And I am called to
Cultivate.
not going back on the past, but going on the present. I must not conflict my worth with my struggle in life, with my OCD and my autism and shaken baby syndrome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing, Joey.
Thank you.
you. So, really appreciate some of the thoughts that have come up, and I would love to hear. It looks like you might have a thought about our last slide.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
We realized that we have a lot in common. Yes. First of all, we're trying to analyze some of the questions, and like the one that I asked you. But I'm Kagi, and she's Peggy, and we've been given the talent of being patient, and to cultivate friendship, love, and joy. And we're worthy, and we should not be pressurized by peer pressure, money, and what else? Friendship. Yeah, because that can lead you astray, and then you end up being nothing because you follow those peer pressures. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, I want you to take a look at the person beside you and look them in the eye and read this phrase to them. Your work, your worth is inherited. A job title cannot give it to you, and a bad day cannot take it away. Can you turn to the next person around you and say this to them? Okay. All right. So, oh, yeah, you want to do it again? Absolutely. All right, we're going to make this stick. Go ahead, please. Let's do it again. So let's talk about the intense cultural shock of entering the workforce. The transition from school to a professional system is not just a career milestone, but it's a massive formational pivot. Think about it. School has a very predictable script. It asks, can you complete the assignment by Tuesday? And if you follow the rubric, you can get an A. but the workplace doesn't operate on a syllabus. For most of you, right? You would agree? Yeah. And work instead asks, can you navigate ambiguity? Can you handle the corporate hierarchy and intense emotional pressure and professional perception and competing responsibilities? It's a completely different landscape. Now, I realize in the room with me, I have a mixed crowd. Not everybody has just graduated college and they're entering the workforce, but that means that there's a lot more wisdom in this space. I'm curious to hear from you. What are the questions you can remember that your childhood, or specifically being in school, asked that are different than the questions that a workplace, a career asks? Any thoughts on this? Absolutely. So, given that this room is full of folks who have experienced school, childhoods, and also workplaces, I am curious to know what you've observed have been the differences between those two things. Because we're talking about the cultural shock of moving out of, say, a school environment that has a particular structure, and if you check these boxes, you get an A, and now a workplace or career where it's not necessarily the ask. Yes.
And develop, their abilities, and they don't want to.
This is such a good observation. And your name is? Lisa. Lisa just expressed that she remembers being in school and you essentially had the opportunity to do most of your interacting within a particular set peer group, right? But at work, that's not necessarily the case. You're engaging with all kinds of folks and personalities. It sounds like she's an educator, and she's talking about even the fact that she's educating different peer groups, and within those peer groups have different personalities. Am I interpreting that right? Okay, that's a good one. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for me, going through school, I've always been in sales, so I've always had the luxury. I feel like Jesus is a friend to all. And so when you're out and about, just realize that, hey, friendship evangelism at any level is a beautiful thing, right? But as we're getting more full of wisdom, or the lack thereof, what I've decided, really what transitions are, like I went from one corporation that was really highly intense to another corporation because there was a layoff at the previous company. And that cultural shift of that previous organization didn't really jive well with the new organization. So you have to figure out the culture of the new organization. Still same people, are similar roles, but just developing that, be able to relate, and also being able to bring Christ wherever we go. And we ultimately, as moms, that's our biggest responsibility. So you got to be able to shift that hat when you come home and embrace that beautiful children that we have, and know that that's ultimately our goal. That, I always find it's like a shifting thing too. Like, if we're doing really great at work, oh my, we're probably dropping the bucket at home. And when we're doing so good at work or home, vice versa, like, oh my goodness, I'm letting them down there. So it's especially as women, and maybe as guys too, that we're all shifting roles. And also when you think about nonprofit work as well, what does that look like? Each organization is different, and how can we understand, how can we transition through that? But also, I think wherever we're at, be God's hands and feet, and don't, as somebody at our church said, don't miss your divine appointments.
Thank you so much, Can you tell us your name?
I'm shy. Just kidding. I'm Trisha.
Thank you, Tricia. Any other thoughts? The contrast between these two spaces? Yes.
Hi, my name is James. I just
Hi,
wanted to
James.
say, like in school, you have a structured way of doing things.
Yes.
For instance, you're told if you're doing this assignment, you have to use APA style. And if you don't understand, maybe use this particular book. And then I deal with mental health patients. My wife does the same thing. Basically, unlike school, you have every person is different and they have different dynamics and different needs. And, like you have to kind of think, the way I always tell my patients, what works for him will not work for you. So you have to
Right.
kind of think outside the box and try to be able to meet them at their need. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? So, oh, yeah.
I think school gives you more of a room to make mistakes, and I think the workplace is like you're gonna make a mistake, and you're more hesitant because it affects so many people. And yeah, I think that's the biggest difference I've noticed.
What's your name?
Raquel.
Raquel, I think you're speaking to the high stakes nature of it.
Yes.
Where you essentially, for many of us in this room, we work so that we can earn, so that we can, live. And so whereas in school you get the F, it doesn't necessarily affect you living. Your parents figure that part out, right? But
Yes.
here, there's a sense of like, well, if I fail here, it can truly actually compromise my own existence, right? And I think all of those things, everything that you shared here, really for folks just coming into the workplace, it can make it feel so intense, and the pressures, even if it's not necessarily coming from the workplace itself, like, oh, having a poor boss, folks can feel all manner of pressure because of the stark differences between a workplace culture, being at workplace, what it looks like to show up professionally and earn a paycheck as opposed to earning a good grade. It's just completely different. The next slide, I realize, has this block. Oh, I'm not sure why that happened, you all. But I do want to know, my question for you is, in one or two words, what is the biggest pressure you feel in your career right now? And because I realize that the QR code is covered, it's going to take much too long for you to go to menti.com, put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever those numbers are. So why don't you speak back to me and tell me what you feel or what you have felt in the past. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be going through it right now, but what can you say has been a consistent pressure as it relates to work for you? Please. You said mandates. When you say mandates, I'm thinking policies. I'm thinking rules. Is that what you're speaking of? I'm so sorry. I'm not. I need the. Thank you. I totally heard mandates, but you were explaining what you wanted to, what you're trying to articulate on mandates.
Yeah, mandates like overtime, mandatory overtime policies.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
regulations,
Yes.
implemented by the company. Things that you have to get done, or
Right.
you'll get fired.
Okay,
Things like
yes, that is pressure, right? Because at school, if you came in 5 minutes late, you might get a late slip and then, maybe go to the principal's office for an hour. But here, the mandates or the policies require X, Y, and Z time entry, and if you don't make it once or twice or 3 times or whatever the policy says, then you can actually get nicked, right? And any other thoughts? I think this gentleman.
My name is Moses, and social dynamics.
Social dynamics, oh, you just touch on something so rich. And I can probably go on and on about this. Social dynamics. This is probably one of the least talked about aspects of work that our culture speaks to. I mean, we talk about getting the degrees and getting the fellowships and getting the hours completed, but we very rarely talk about the social dynamics that run the workplace. I need to come back to that. Thank you so much. So rich. What's your name? Moses. Thank you, Moses. Yes, Francis.
I think the thing that I've been feeling the most pressure in right now is probably I'm entering kind of a leadership role at work and finding the fine line of being able to communicate your needs while also trying not to step on anyone else's toes, while also trying to grow but not being taken advantage of, and the whole complication of being a woman and being young and having to try and navigate the respect but also not, stomping down and being the B word and all of that, that kind of that's been the whole last few years, I think.
Thank you so much, Francis. I feel like we cracked the room open just now, because when we're talking about work, we can certainly talk about policies and things, and all of those things have pressure. But as you move in these spaces and grow and you are rewarded with more responsibility, I think what Moses said about social dynamics, and then what Francis is adding to the fact that there are so many aspects of our identity that shows up in these spaces, and people respond in different ways. How do we manage the dynamics, the hierarchy, the fact that your status has shifted, and now the room is not so receptive to you because you were friends, but now everybody's like, you're not my friend because you're now the boss. But okay. All of that, very, very interesting. Any other thoughts? Yes, please.
For me, I think it's maintaining my Christian values and integrity, even if they don't align with the company's culture and expectations. It can be a little bit tricky sometimes to navigate.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that, because I like this topic. I want to hear something.
For example, a lot of times they have, events that they keep on the Sabbath, and then, because of my faith and maintaining that the Sabbath is the Lord's day, I usually don't attend. So to some people, it may come across as if I don't want to be a part of the culture or to get along with everyone else. And then there are times when there are stuff that are being said, and you have to, for example, when we had the DEI meeting and stuff like that with inclusion and the LGBT, issues that was going on, and wanting to be a part of it because I was in the HR department, which it was very difficult to navigate to that space without coming across as being, people tend to think, oh, you're against them if you're not in agreement with what they're saying. So it's hard sometimes.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I want to take some time to connect you with each other. And I'm realizing now that we've actually spent quite a bit of time already sharing within this room about school and what surprised us most about work adult responsibility. But we might be able to dig even a little bit deeper. I want you to lean into these 3 questions honestly. And while we've likely spent enough time on the what did school not prepare you for, I think there could be more to speak about when we consider the other questions. what surprised you most about work and adult responsibility, and what kind of person is your environment rewarding? So what we'll do is get into our tables here and think about your office or where you've worked, and what kind of person or behavior is your current environment actually rewarding? What surprised you most about real-world responsibility? I want you to introduce yourselves and keep it real and talk a little bit more about these particular questions, specifically the last two on the screen. All right, so we're going to take about, let's take about 12 minutes. Is that all right? Yeah, thank you. I like when you have the song playing. Thank you. Your engagement today. We're going to shift gears a little bit and do a little bit of a study on Daniel. Daniel in Babylon. So Babylon can be seen in this context. Our conversation. In the context of our conversation today, is not just an ancient kingdom, but as a high-stress, intense corporate headquarters. The system gave Daniel a new location, a new language, an elite education, an executive name change, a strict corporate diet, and immense professional opportunity. Daniel didn't run away to a monastery. He engaged in the system. But he operated under a completely different rule. I think Daniel gives us a really beautiful insight into how we can engage in the system, be completely whole, and be influential in the system. You know, when we mentioned a couple of things in our conversation today about social dynamics and our Christian ethics, I recognize that these things do not have to be polar opposites of each other. We don't have to say, I'm going to accept everything the workplace gives me in order for me to be successful, and ignore my Christianity, or and disregard all of that. We can actually walk into the spaces with a really clear understanding of who we are, who we're called to be, and just like Daniel, continue to influence the space and live out exactly what God's called us to do, even in those spaces. So why don't we take some time looking at Daniel verses 1, verses 3 to 8. I'm going to have two folks read for us today. Someone can read from verses 3 to 5, and another person can read from verse 6 to 8. Do I have some volunteers this afternoon? Thank you.
Years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service.
I got here just in time.
Did you want me to keep going? That was 5.
And then another person can read from verse 6 to 8.
Or you can.
I'll do
Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hannah, what is it? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. 7. The chief, the, the chief official gave them new names to Daniel. The name Balthazar to Hananiah, and Shadrach to Meshach. Meshat, I'm sorry, and to Azariah, Abednego. Okay, I'm sorry, I butchered it.
That's all right. You're doing all right. Thank you. Go ahead, continue.
Okay. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, "I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you."
Okay. I hope that this little snippet from the story jogs your memory about the story of Daniel. I'm happy to share a little bit more. That last line was a little bit of a cliffhanger, but essentially the arrangement is made for Daniel and the other gentleman named within the text to have a different diet, and they end up doing very well, thriving, and so much so that essentially the king decides that the diet will now be exactly what Daniel and his friends have been fed. So, where do modern workplaces ask us to adapt, and where might they ask us to compromise? So, what's interesting about Daniel is that he accepted the language and the training and the public service, and he excelled with absolute competence. He didn't quiet quit Babylon, but he resisted identity loss and spiritual compromise. He knew where the line was. So let me ask you in this room, and you can just shout it out. Back to my question, where do modern workplaces ask us to adapt and grow? And where do you see the subtle invitation to completely compromise who you are? Keeping the Sabbath, yes. That's a good one. Although some of us in this room who are in healthcare and work with patients have a different, have a calling that requires our service even during Sabbath hours so that man can be whole. That's acceptable. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If there's no way of not working, and maybe you're the only doctor or something, and you have to save a life, that's acceptable.
Sure. And I was mentioning it not because it wasn't acceptable. I was just giving some nuance, right, to what you're saying. Go ahead, Eileen.
My last place I worked, even though I worked 41 years for the federal government, it wasn't in one place. The last place I worked was 13 years with FEMA. So when they sent us out, I worked in an office, so I didn't have to work on the Sabbath. I got the weekends off. But when we went to a disaster, I was asked to work on the Sabbath. And if it was a disaster. So I was kind of blessed when I talked to, pastors and, this is a disaster. So you're helping people. So I felt that was right. But whenever I got a chance, I go to church.
Yeah.
When I had a chance, but yeah.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this question? Well, how about this question? Oh, yes, please. Please.
I was just going to mention, I work in the emergency department, and there is constantly an ask to adapt to different environments. And I think one thing that's uncomfortable for both patients and for us is now, there's no space in the hospital, so you're waiting in the waiting room, or you're being seen in the hallways, and the time adaptation, like there's just huge volumes of patients. So now, even though your personal the reason you get into medicine, the reason you feel called to it is because you want to connect with people and help with people, but then your work demands of you, we can't have you connect with 30 people in 4 hours, so you got to figure out how to connect with these people really fast so that they can get what they need, and you address the emergency and all that. And so that has been kind of like the push and pull of how do you connect with somebody in a time constraint where you want to, in a really broken healthcare system where you're dealing with everyone's frustrations, and you yourself are frustrated with the way the system is set up, and knowing that big picture you're not able to fix it, but how can you affect the small moments that you are able to see somebody.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Ruth. Thanks, Francis.
In my position, I often find myself having to essentially repeat what everybody knows is a lie as part of an argument. And so a lot of us have developed a language to say, my client has represented to me that blah, 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 blah. Because the judge knows it's a lie, the DA knows it's a lie, I know it's a lie, but I have a legal responsibility
Absolutely.
to represent my client. And so
Right.
they'll tell me the biggest tall tale that you've ever heard, and they want me to say these things in court on the record. And so I say, my client has represented to me, blah, 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 blah.
This
and
is so rich.
and it's a lie. It is. And because of that language, I'm able to
That's right.
let everybody who knows what's going on know that I'm not saying this. I'm doing my job. This is what they've told me is what's happening. And is that ethical? I don't know. But it's a tough one.
It seems like your integrity would still be intact.
Yeah. It's just part of it I think everybody kind of knows what's going on, but I'm still helping my client in the way that they want me to. So it's, just kind of trying to filter through truths and lies, and hoping that justice is done and God intervenes and the judge has the wisdom to see through it.
That's good. Thank you, Ruth. So, I think it's important to consider from Daniel's experience that not all pressure from work is evil and going to condemn you to hell if you do it or if you don't resist it, but rather it can be a tool, and you want to have a filtering and a discerning mindset as you engage in work, and I think we have a great example through your experience, Ruth, because some pressure is God's tool for your development. It sharpens discipline. It teaches you how to do your work even better so that God's ultimate work of bringing the kingdom here on earth can happen, right? It helps us to build competence. It teaches us how to receive and how to engage in good feedback loops, that's when, so the only thing is that we really do have to consider is there are some other pressures that do cause deformation, right? That's when it morphs into chronic overwork and toxic people pleasing and hidden compromises and eventual identity collapse. So when you think about your current job situation, the question I would like for you to ask yourself is your environment developing you, or is it quietly deforming you? And remember, again, not all pressure is bad pressure, but where are those areas where you might push back and, like Daniel, take another way? I'm going to skip on to the next part here, because I think it's important for this to be said. And being yourself at work. We hear so much emphasis. I feel like I hear it all the time. Just be yourself, be yourself in the workplace and, just show up as your whole self. And I think that there's a lot of well-meaning folks who give that type of advice in the face of, someone just coming into a new workplace or just graduating or shifting their role. And, that is not necessarily I would say you want to be really discerning when you think about being yourself at work. I think it's important to consider that what that means in this space, in a workplace, is not necessarily telling everybody about everything about you. It's not necessarily showing up and totally disregarding the policies or mandates and expectations. And it's important to actually come in with a certain filter. And verses 1 to 2 in Romans 12, I think, speaks to this in a very powerful way. And the text reads, if somebody could read it aloud for me.
Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will.
Thank you. So, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That authenticity that we are asked to have in these spaces means that our foundational identity, our ethics, our boundaries, our conduct remain entirely aligned before God, whether we are in the dark or sitting in a performance review. And holding identity practically means that you can receive that feedback without collapsing, and you can be a professional without being fake. You can be warm without being boundaryless. You can be ambitious without being consumed, and you can adapt without disappearing. You can be evaluated without being defined. This is something that took some time for me to understand, that showing up as my full self, the one loved, deeply loved by God, the Christian young woman, doesn't mean I need to be without my own guardrails and my own standards within these spaces. Some of the things I think could be important to consider in workplace settings is what it looks like to respond in ways that allow you to be who God's called you to be and not devolve into a very anxious presence that essentially feels disruptive or adds to the chaos of that workplace. So right now, we've just got a couple of minutes, but I really, really thought it might be fun to speak through and act out what it could look like to be a bad boss, and then having one of these responses to that bad boss. So we're not going to do that now, but I did want to offer some of these scripts that can be particularly helpful at points in work, at work, where you might feel like you're being tested, right? Is there one here that speaks to you in a particular way? Any one of these scripts here that feel particularly relevant or resonant to you? Yeah. Hey, look, I think moms should have boundaries too. Yeah, this one, can I get your name again? Marilyn. This last one, I hesitated using this language here because while it sounds really nice here, I think you really have to read your audience because you can immediately put yourself at odds with a group of people that you didn't mean to. And so I feel like there are other ways to even, say things like this where you're not necessarily having to go into it compromises our standards. I mean, there could be other valid reasons that it doesn't work for you. Like, oh, I don't feel comfortable with this. I have a commitment on Saturday, right? Like, I don't need to go into I'm more religious than you and I believe in Jesus Christ and you don't. Like, right? You guys know what I mean. Like, you want to be mindful of this and even in your responses, think about what it looks like to show up fully myself, but continue to build those bridges and perhaps use language and excuses that feel like they're more out of your hand than within your hand. Because once you say things like, I don't feel comfortable, it compromises our standards. Sometimes it feels like, that's easier for folks to poke at than, I don't feel comfortable with this. On Saturdays, I have a standing commitment with my family. People are like, oh, your family? Well, standing commitment, I can't touch that, right? And then it doesn't feel as offensive, right? But again, I think that there's a time and place to truly say, look, you and I both know we got the same standards, don't we? Let's not do this. Any other thoughts here? Any script? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Any other thoughts? Any particular script here that stands out to you? Yes. Yes. Some people will be like, well, I can discuss it now, but and I'm going to be my authentic self here. But the authentic self, after receiving feedback that feels a little unsettling and feels a little bit attacky, probably won't show up very well, right? You're going to get defensive. You're going to, and maybe that's not the response you want in that context, because of the fact that work perception actually matters. And saying something as simple as, I appreciate you telling me that. Can we circle back tomorrow? Because I want to discuss how I can grow in this area. And you can take that pivot, you can take a beat, and just let yourself not be happy that you just heard feedback that you didn't want to hear, right? But tomorrow you're prepared. You would have grounded yourself. You would have reminded yourself that I am not the feedback. God's called me. I am his. I don't need to, use this feedback to now let it remind me of what my mom always told me that was so mean and cruel and I didn't, right? We don't need to do that. We can say, let me step away for a minute. Thank you so much. Can we talk about this tomorrow? I want to give some more time to this, right? Okay. So, you all, we've come to the end of this conversation, and it's been a really rich one. I want to thank you for your engagement and your time this afternoon. My name, again, is Cassandre Beccai, and you can stay connected with me as you continue to navigate your career journey. My LinkedIn is on here, email and contact info right here. You're welcome to reach out and keep that conversation going. I hope you have a wonderful rest of camp meeting, and I'll see you around. Thank you.